Okay, good evening for coming out to hear our speakers, the different perspectives we have on 9/11. We're 22 years out just of last week, and it's just amazing how it occurs over time. I know where I was exactly when I saw it on TV, and I'm sure many of you remember it. It's something that's just totally embedded in your mind. You know exactly what you're doing, where you heard of it, where you saw that entirety occur. And yet, it's so neat to see the younger crowd here tonight, because all you've got is the videos to watch, and maybe a little bit in history class, but you really don't know the real-time emotion attached to it and how our lives changed immediately after that, how getting through security at an airport is just ginormous now, and you had no idea how we used to do it as kids and how easy it was to get around. Even get into a football game now, how much security is everywhere, and that's all because of 9/11, which these speakers are going to talk about. I'm from Lincoln, Nebraska here, and we happened to meet Gordon in New York in 2019, and we were so fortunate that he wanted to come out and hear and see what we were doing in Lincoln here, because we have at Lincoln Southeast High School, the theater there, which hopefully maybe some of you kids can go to when you go to high school, named after Jennifer Dorsey Howley. She was a 1985 graduate, and she was in the World Trade Center, and she was sadly killed that day. And they, in her honor, named that theater after her. And Gordon was so impressed with that, he came out and he spoke to numerous students, and this is his third time coming back, which is just amazing, because we've tried to offer him money and he never accepts it. He's doing this all on his own dime, as you're going to hear in the presentation, everything that he does. It's just fantastic, the stories that they have. And we're going to begin with a different view. Gordon's on the outside, and Chris was on the inside of a tower. And just to get a different perspective on how that day went. And so, Chris, come on up and let's hear your story.
Thank you, Brian. Good evening, all.
Good evening.
You mentioned my name's Chris, and I do want to start off how I was in the Air Force back in the 80s. And when Top Gun came out, and you're in the fighter there, well, I was in the F-4. I was in the back seat. I was actually Goose. And the front seater is Nebraska's very own Brad Norton. He's here with his family. So I got to fly F-4s with him. And of course, Mary, his wife, is from Lincoln. So when they said, you want to come speak at Nebraska? I said, sure. So here I am. Well, it turned out that was my life before being in the Trade Center. And in the early 90s, the military had a drawdown. And with such that I came back to my hometown of Brooklyn, New York, where I got a job with the New York State Department of Transportation, which is how I ended up in the Trade Center. Now I have to talk about the Trade Center so you have some idea what we had, because it was marvelous or majestic in terms of the towers. They're 110 stories tall. You can see them anywhere in New York City. And down here, that little building there, that little building is bigger than the Capitol downtown here, because that's 22 stories. And last count, I heard you have 15 floors on the Capitol there. But that's just to show you the scale in terms of how tall those towers are. And those towers held 25,000 each. In other words, 25,000 people. And you could have 100,000 people going through the complex, because it was more than just the towers. As you can see from the next photo, here's tower number 1, here's tower number 2, there's the little 22-story tower as tower 3, and then you had 4, 5 on the end, 6 here. It's a series of corridors which connected all the buildings, and it was an underground mall. And being a transit center, you can have 100,000 people going through the complex. So it's easy to understand why this was the 3rd largest grocery mall in America at the time. A lot of people to serve. And then on the 106th and 107th floor, we had Windows on the World, a 5-star restaurant. When you go into New York, you're gonna treat yourself. Look at that view. Well, that view is pretty much any floor above the 50th floor, because you get to see the rest of Manhattan, the rest of New York City, the outer boroughs. Well, again, here's that little 22-story building, so you can see how tall it is. And we had a couple of ways of getting into the Trade Center. Whether you come in off the street side, the mezzanine, you can come down the escalator to get on to the elevators, or you can come through the underground mall to get on the elevators that you see off to the side there. But I ended up that morning, and actually, here's the plaza level, which is right above that mall. But I ended up taking the elevator up to the 82nd floor, for that's the floor I was on, my office. And I was actually on that far side of the tower because that's the north. That's the direction the plane came in. That view of the restaurant that you saw, that's the north, the way the plane came in. And it turned out that I actually worked with my back to the window, and that's a good thing, because if I saw that plane coming, who knows what frame of mind I would be in today. But I know as a flyer, when a plane's going that quick, you don't hear it until it's on top of you. And all I had was a quick rush of wind, like a big whoosh, as it slammed into the building, pushed the building forward, and then the building sprang back. Well, with that, believe it or not, it didn't seem so bad to me at the time, but I guarantee you, sitting on a chair with wheels, it didn't seem as such because the building just slid out from underneath me. And then, of course, it came back. The people on the far end of the building, they got knocked to the floor with everything else. And I would find out later, my coworkers on the side of the building, they saw the walls literally bend and spring back. So with that, I get up out of my seat and I take a look out the window there. And it turned out that the fireball was mostly on the other side, but when I looked out the window there, I saw all the paper and metal shard fluttering to the ground, kind of like a ticker tape parade. And I remember thinking, boy, you don't see this much, and you want to stay and watch. And I guess that's when my military training kicked in, because from that moment on, I was focused on the next 5 things constantly until I would get home many hours later. But the one thing is that I need to backtrack a little. This is not the first attack on America. Back in February of '93, well, not of America, of the Trade Center itself, back in February '93, they loaded up a bomb with explosive fertilizer, put it in the underground parking lot. We had everything there. We had underground parking. And they detonated it. Well, it turned out that 6 people were killed, 7 if you include the unborn child of a woman going on maternity leave the very next day. But that day never came for her. But no matter how bad the event was, there were many lessons learned, for which I'll talk about later. One of those lessons is fire drills. Now, it turns out that when they do a fire drill, they ring the bell, you go to the front door, you wait for directions, and then you go in the hallway and you go look at the 3 stairwell, and then you go back to work. This was a fire drill for real. I go to the front door, I wait for directions, there are none. And then I look in the hallway there, and it is dark and smoky. And it turned out that I pretty much would find out many months later that a huge fireball came down the hall. And it's a good thing we kept the door closed, because that door protected the secretaries from the fireball. But by the time I got there, I'm just looking down the corridor, and I didn't want to go out into the dark. I didn't have to go far. I probably as far as the end of the pews, the last pew down there, where I finally heard somebody in the dark say, "Come to my voice, come to my voice." And that's all I needed to do to go where I thought the stairs were, and sure enough, that's where they were. Now, it turned out that I already talked about the fire drills, and then the smoke-filled corridor that I just got out of, because now I'm in the stairs and the stairs are lit. But the first thing I noticed is nobody's coming down the stairs. Where is everybody? There's 28 floors above me. We now know the impact zone was pretty close above me in terms of the 93rd to 99th floor. Nobody more than 10 floors above me, the 92nd floor or above, will get out. The moment that plane entered, 1,360 people associated with Tower 1 will not get out. But I don't know that. I'm just running down the stairs quickly, looking at the big numbers, 76, 75, as you're going on down, and you get to the upper 60s, and everyone got the same idea in terms of getting out of the building. And then you're measuring it a step at a time. And then it's just human gridlock. So what that does is I'm against the banister there, looking down. Let me see how many people are down there. And I can see endless line of people, hundreds of arms, all the way down. So it just seems like an endless line all the way down. About that time, a bunch of snappers popped up out of nowhere. Actually, I would find out later somebody smashed the machine and just sent them up, I guess they weren't going to use them anymore. But it turned out that we had these apples there. You take a swig, you just pass it along just to calm your nerves. This is before COVID, so you're not worried about passing it along. And just to pass the time, while you're standing there, you talk to your neighbor. Whoop, there I was in 93. Here we go again. Even though I was not there in 93, a lot of people were evacuating for the second time. So that was quite common to hear. And then at that time is when the other tower got hit. United Airlines came from the opposite direction into tower number 2. With the two towers being so close, I do not recall hearing the impact. Another lesson learned from 93 is the lack of communications. This time we had the host agency people in the stairwells with us with walkie-talkies, radios. So even though I didn't hear the impact, I knew immediately what happened from the message traffic over the radios. So if you thought it was an accident like I did, now you know it wasn't an accident. 2 buildings don't get hit on a beautiful day. So we finally make our way down to the 44th floor. It's a sky lobby. You change elevators. Even though we're not using elevators, they want us out of one stairwell into a different stairwell. And there's 150 people trying to get into a little tiny door. And here I am in the back of the pack watching this, and I turn around and I see a nice empty door. What do you think I do? Look at my boss, I give him the old head nod, and we go running down those stairs. And we did a good job until we turned the 40th floor there, only to see the back end of human gridlock. New lesson learned, or old lesson learned, is do what you're told. Those who waited for the other stairs would get out 15 minutes ahead of us, which would make a huge difference. But it turns out that they were trying to hold these stairs for the injured. Now look how wide that stairs is. It's not wide at all. And it turned out that as you're standing there 2 by 2, you hear people behind you say, move to the right. So you move on over and you let the injured go by. And you keep on moving back and forth every time you hear move to the right, as all the injured came down. And the worst one I remember is a lady burned pretty much full burn up to the, from particularly the waist up, coming down like a mummy, holding out her burns, because that's the most comfortable way she can be. And my boss, being the compassionate person he is, sees that she's unescorted, all by herself. So as she's coming on down, he wants to go give her a hand, and that's the last thing you want to do to a burn victim, as she yelled from the pain. But he ended up helping her out of the building that day. And it wasn't until after telling that story for many years, at the 12th anniversary, I started second-guessing myself, where I saw my boss. I go, remember that lady you helped out of the building? I remember her hair was in, braided in cornrows. Come to think of it, her hair wasn't braided, was it? And he said, no. That's pretty much how the hair ended up on her head that day. So getting back into the stairs, we start to see the first firefighters finally come up the stairs, huffing and puffing. I huff and puff up 2 flights of stairs now. And, to their credit, the determination for them getting up all those stairs. And look how close you are. Even closer than I am to him now, I'm looking him in the eye, because I got nothing better to do than wait my turn. And he's looking you in the eye because you got nothing but these 1,000 steps ahead of you. What do you tell him other than good luck? That he probably heard 1,000 times coming up the stairs. What do you say under that situation? I'm pretty much at a loss for words. But after the occasional good luck and seeing them all go by, the stairs is now emptying out, where there's really nobody in front of us, and I'm with 2 coworkers, Jen and Larissa, where we run down the last 20 flights of stairs to get to the lobby, where it's the first time we see the true devastation of, looked like a bomb went off, glass everywhere, and everyone's seen shiny metal elevator doors. I bet none of you seen the elevator door just melted back on itself. And I have, just melted off the door. And I have no idea how those elevators are working, but I see that last elevator full of firefighters getting right up to the 44th floor. And I'm thinking, boy, those guys are gonna be lucky, because when they get off the elevator on the 44th floor, guess who's coming out of the stairs? Those guys that just walked up 44 flights of stairs. Only to realize how lucky those guys probably were. I bet you some of those names on the memorial. So here I am, like I do every day. Leaving my tower here, I'm just gonna go straight down this corridor, right to the subway. Sounds like a great plan, except when I go this way and I look and see right into tower number 2, the mall actually looked good. It looked like a mall at night. Everything's closed, just a few people. As I continue on down to over here, no sooner am I 30 feet past that corridor, I hear a rush of wind. As I start to turn around to see that billowing cloud of dust, as I start to hear some noise. And all of a sudden, I know I want to be against some place close. I mean, a column. I want to be against a column. But I know there's no columns down there. But I know what the wall would do. And the wall is like where the last candle is, right over here, on the end of the altar. So as soon as I saw that, I immediately ran to the wall, and those huge store windows that go to the ceiling start flying out toward me. And I made a bet to myself, I can get past that window and grab that wall, which is exactly what I ended up doing. Right now, the first collapse, tower number 2, is coming down on top of us. As you can imagine, it's crushing everything in tower 2, people's walls, chairs, computers. I guarantee you those people in the corridor behind me, they did not get out. They got smacked up against the coffee bar with everything else coming out of tower number 2. I'm around the corner. I get to the wall. You hold on really tight. You close your eyes because it's dark and you're getting sandblasted by all this stuff. And they say the towers came down in 10 to 12 seconds. Like, really? I believe them because they must have studied the tapes forever. But I can tell you, after the 10 to 12 seconds, first of all, you wouldn't believe how many things you can think of in 12 seconds. Like, first of all, you hear it, you see it, you immediately think you want to be there, so you're just reacting naturally. You get to the wall, you squeeze it really tight, like you're hugging it, and because you don't know what's going to happen as you're thinking that, and then you remember thinking, okay, so this is what it feels like to die. Well, I'm not dead yet, so you start getting into survival mode. But I can tell you afterwards, after the collapse, it was the most peaceful, quiet you'll ever hear. Because I didn't hear a peep, I didn't hear a moan, I heard nothing. And when I finally opened my eyes, there was one little tiny light. I called for Jan to come to the light, my coworker. He said he couldn't see the light. Come to my voice. Come to my voice. He popped out of the dark. My other coworker, Larissa, is right behind him. I have 2 other coworkers coming this way saying, we got to go this way. I go, what, are you kidding me? I was plastered to the wall. I know exactly where I am. We got to go this way. They admitted how disoriented they were. So then I moved around a little to see what I can see. And then I finally stopped to, gather my thoughts and come up with the ideas and what I'm going to do. Where I started talking aloud because I sensed there was a group of people around me. It was so dark, you could not even see a hand here. But I knew there were people there, and I started talking loud, particularly to my coworker, Jan, in terms of, okay, we got 2 choices. We wait to get rescued or we walk out of here. And whatever it was bad, so we better get walking. And with that, a woman said, I cannot walk. I knew immediately what she meant. I don't know how many ladies are going to go down 80, 50, whatever, even 5 flights of stairs with heels. I saw the heels on the side of the stairs as you're going on down. And I saw the glass go flying in the mall before the lights went out. You put the 2 together in your head, I'm about to offer my back, when some other guy said, hop on my back. And that's all I needed to hear because I knew she was taken care of. So then, I get these people behind me, and I want to get a conga line going, because, like I said, you can't see. So I'm doing a mind walk because I know there's several floors of parking down below. I want to make sure there's some floor there. And as I'm walking in the dark, I pick something. Of course, I can't see what it is. That something I can't see is up to my knees that I just banged into. And sure enough, when I got down deep enough, I can see it's those huge overhead signs that hang from the ceiling, blown off the ceiling, now laying down on the ground that I got to go all the way around. And then, as I'm halfway through the underground, I hear somebody say, come to the light, come to the light. He said it twice and that was it. Of course, I don't see no light. Well, it turns out that I yelled to him, keep talking, I hear your voice. I can't see the light. And sure enough, he started up with the come to the light again. where I finally got to him, the guy with the light, and 3 firefighters right next to him. And I can see an exit behind him. It's not close, it's not far, but I see a little daylight. But when I get there, the 3 firefighters said, send them up the escalator. For some gut reason, even though I didn't know what was totally going on, I had a feeling going up the escalator to the plaza level outside was not a good idea. But when the 3 firefighters said, send them up the escalator, the original guy made it easy for me. In so many words, he said, no way. And that's all I needed to hear, because I bolted past the 4 of them for the exit that I could see, which would get me out on the north side of the tower. That's the side of the tower the first plane came in. I basically came out below my window. Now, when I got out, I didn't know there was 10 to 12 people behind me. Jan would tell me later. And it turned out that I see Jan wants to make a phone call. And Larissa's in La La Land. Her mind is still doing this one, coming down the stairs. And I'm picturing, what are you two, crazy? I'm picturing big sheets of glass coming down, and nothing good can come of that. So I pretty much had to push them along the side of a building where we turned the corner, and we didn't stop until we were 5 blocks away, where we finally stopped to look back and see what's going on. And saw a sight we don't see, usually. 1 tower. And if you know I worked on 82nd floor with the hole near the top of the tower there, that was not good. We turned to walk away. We heard that rush of wind again. We ran. We didn't even look. We knew what it was. 30 people in my office. 3 will not make it out. Jen, Larissa, and I were the last 3 people from our office to make it out of the complex alive. Just to recap, like I said, here's another picture of the complex in terms of just the buildings above the mall. But superimpose the corridors. I'm just going to go straight down this corridor to the subway line there. Look down corridor, tower number 2, but I didn't even get that far. Over here is where I hugged the wall with the collapse, right under the middle of the plaza, underneath in the mall. And then I worked my way this way and went out the blue line off the top there. Here is where Jan wants to make a call, and I said, hey, we gotta get going. Pushed them along this side of the building where we turned the corner and worked our way up further from the complex. Over here is Warner Brothers. That's one of the stores down there. Picture hugging this wall, and that there's no windows here because they flew past you. Even though that wasn't the store, that's exactly what we're dealing with down in the mall. And this is even the sub-basement where the parking lot is, and you can see the damage down there below us. This is not me, but that's what I look like. What happened is when we came out of the building into the underground mall, the sprinkler system was working. The only time we saw the sprinkler system working. You laugh, but it was cold. That was the sad part, it was freezing. And then you're soaked, and of course you're going into the mall and everything's fine until you have the building come down on top of you. And then when you grab the wall, and you're getting sandblasted by all that stuff, now you know how we became the mud people. And you see, this is a white shirt. That's the part that didn't get the dust. So you can see how we came to look like that. And here's the last time you're probably gonna see the 2 towers standing together. And here's pretty much on the street some of the other views in terms of what it did look like on the street with the collapse and having all that dust around you. So it turns out people ask me, what have I learned from going through this experience? Some of the words that I can share. Well, the one thing is drills, like something as simple as a fire drill. Simulation. Like the fire drills, you know what you're gonna do. Because when a fire happens, that's not the time to stop and think. And then like when I'm flying with Brad here, and they're gonna put us in a simulator. It's not like we can go flying around, cut the engines and see what happens when you have no engines. So you do the simulator, you go through the procedure automatically. And that's the things with drills. You do that procedure automatically. Get those first couple of steps out of the way. Stay focused, think ahead. While you're standing there in the stairs, it's not the time to have a party or something. It's the time to stay focused. Think of what's coming up. What could possibly happen? How can you help yourself? Attention to detail. Like when I'm down there and I hear that cloud, or see that cloud and hear the noise, and I know I want to be against a column. That makes sense. I want to be near some support. But by walking that every day, paying attention to what's around, I knew that that wasn't going to happen. Same thing with walking out in the dark. I knew what was down in the concourse there because I paid attention walking the corridors every day. Formulating plans. Yeah, sometimes you're going to have to make a plan on the fly. It's not like I knew I planned on being down there, but it turned out I even had a plan B where I was going to think of going through the subway, down through the underground subway to the next station just to get out of the complex. But I did discount that because there was too much smoke going down into the subway. Lead versus waiting to be led. If I waited to be led, I probably wouldn't have been here. Instill a sense of urgency. Well, it turned out that it was great getting outside. It felt great. But then again, that wasn't the time to let up your guard. They may have let up their guard, but I got to keep that sense of urgency in them to keep them moving. But the bottom line is even with all those points, the big thing, overarching theme is situational awareness. Even though I didn't know exactly everything what was happening, I knew enough information at the time to act accordingly for the cards I was dealt. Now, again, getting back to my military side, being with the Air National Guard, I really missed the camaraderie. So I ended up joining the Air National Guard after I got my civilian job, where I could finish out my military career. And I ended up being in the HC-130. If you've seen the movie The Perfect Storm, we're the refueling 130s that we refuel the helicopters. Well, it turned out that I ended up having orders to deploy overseas for the end of September, before September 11th. This was my excuse to stay home. Nobody would fault me. But there was no way my guys were going over without me being second in command, and by now it was personal. So I deployed by the end of the month, and I was in theater in the Persian Gulf, where I was able to tell the troops the story from a first-hand account. They heard basically what you're hearing tonight. Now, in terms of the numbers, 2,749 people were murdered September 11th. That's just down at the Trade Center. Don't forget September 11th included the Pentagon in Shanksville, Pennsylvania. But it turns out we get magnitude of the devastation, publicity because of the magnitude of the devastation. 1,650 people were identified, but 1,100 were never identified whatsoever. They simply vanished off the face of the earth that day. And then, in terms of the devastation, 22,000 remains have been recovered. 174 full bodies, by definition, that's more than 50%. Typically, the firefighters, they had protective garbs on themselves. But it turns out that, again, I do this for my three co-workers that are no longer here. And every year we get together. That's actually Jan and Larissa, where we spend special time together that one time a year. Even though we still worked with each other until about a year ago, and Jan and I did retire together. Thank you. And I'm going to pass it up to Gordon.
Good evening, folks.
Okay, you heard it.
For you folks in the back, you can move up a bit because the screen is rather tiny. Okay, just move on up. What's really unique is Chris is a survivor. He's the only one that I know of that was inside the building. I know hundreds, and Chris and I were from the original museum that's down at Ground Zero. So we have hundreds of docents, hundreds of survivors. But he's the only one that I know of who was inside the building and survived. Most of us who survived, we were outside the building. So now you're going to get it from our perspective. Before I forget, that museum that we have down at Ground Zero, 2 words resonated throughout the whole country: never forget. Well, the country has forgotten. August 2022, we have closed the museum forever and ever. So it's very sad. The federal government, they still open the National Memorial, but in the National Memorial, they're not allowed to have us give our stories. And that's why people from America, from around the world, basically, they came to our museum because they don't really want to see the stuff that's on static display, but they actually want to hear the stories, our personal account. And unfortunately, that's gone forever. As Chris mentioned, the towers are 110 stories up. Mr. Yamazaki, he's the architect of those two buildings. You notice that when we have, well, you probably don't notice it in the sanctuary here, most buildings have columns that supports the building, then you build walls around it. World Trade Center building had no columns. The entire support of the World Trade Center was on the outside exoskeleton. Mr. Yamazaki did that intentionally because there was a theory that a plane would be coming from Europe. There'll be fog in New York. Pilot gets a little lost, smacks into the World Trade Center. His design of these two buildings were to withstand the impact of a passenger jumbo jet, not a Piper Cub, a passenger jumbo jet. September 11, 2001, his theory was put to the test. Both buildings were struck by two separate jumbo jets. He was proven correct. Both buildings did not fall. You notice those buildings stood. The terrorists, unfortunately, were smarter than us. They didn't use a plane from Europe. They didn't use a plane from California or even Florida. They used local planes. These planes came from Boston. They came from New Jersey. They came from Washington, D.C. These planes were loaded with fuel because they were headed out toward California. It was that jet fuel that started the combustion that melted the exoskeleton, which in turn brought the buildings down. But that was key because the attack of February 26, 1993, it took us many hours to evacuate the World Trade Center. And doing all the fire drills that Chris had mentioned, we were able to evacuate these buildings in 46 minutes. Really big difference from the 8 hours that it took back in 1993. We needed 46 minutes to evacuate. Mr. Yamazaki's design bought us 102 minutes, so we had a little buffer zone to spare, which was key, and that's why we're glad Chris is here. Okay, let me just go over here. And here you have the attack of February 26, 1993. Massive car bomb, truck bomb that is. This is from the FBI. And you can see inside here, the truck bomb was so large, it wiped out the cars in that one parking lot, an area of an American football field. Crater, as you can see, is 5.5 stories deep, 2 stories up. Massive truck bomb. As you can tell by my facial features, I'm Chinese American. I was born and raised in Chinatown, New York City. And you can see this is Chinatown, but look in the back. Those are the World Trade Center. It's only about a 15-minute walk. Well, for you, it's a 15-minute walk. For me, it's a half-hour walk. I'm pretty slow these days. Okay. Now, in Chinatown, New York City, there's really no place to play. We really didn't have a playground. Not like out here. Out here, you have a lot of room. We didn't have any room back there in New York City. So my playground was the financial district. 4 o'clock every day, and on Saturdays and Sundays, the place becomes a ghost town. It's fantastic because I can stand out there all day Saturday, not see one human being walk on the street, not a car parked on the street. So this is where I learned to ride a bike, skateboard, and by the age of 10, I pretty much owned Wall Street. It was fantastic. My real job is I do orthopedic surgery, and one of my offices back then was on 35th and Park Avenue. For those of you who are not familiar with 35th and Park Avenue, we're about 3-4 miles just north of Ground Zero. Back then, I loved doing research. I was doing a paper of Eastern versus Western medicine on this one disease entity. I can go into any hospital in the United States, interview the patients. I get the Western perspective. But to make the paper legitimate, I also need the Eastern perspective. Near Chinatown is a hospital known as Beekman Hospital. Being so close to Chinatown had a huge Asian population. So I was on my way to Beekman to interview a handful of their patients. I don't work at Beekman, but I had permission to interview a few of their patients. And you can see that's about where Beekman Hospital is, pretty close to where the towers are. As I start walking toward Beekman, I look up and I see the towers on fire. I did not see the planes hit, but when I looked up, I see the towers on fire. My background, is I'm a former combat medic in the U.S. Army, and many years later, after I graduated medicine, I went into the Air Force as a medical officer. But as Chris mentioned, you don't need a military background when you see two buildings struck by two separate planes at the same time. It's a no-brainer. You know you're under attack. So instead of heading to my meeting, I decided to head to the World Trade Centers to see what I can do to help. As I got to the base of Tower 2 came exploding down. This is the flight plan. Out of Boston, 2 planes came here, impacted right into the World Trade Center. Down here in Dulles Airport, Flight 77 departed, was hijacked, came in and hit the E-wing of the Pentagon. The Pentagon has 5 wings. By the grace of God, the E-wing happened to be under renovation at that time. We did lose 186 people that day, military personnel, but it could have been a whole lot worse. And of course, there's Flight 93 that came out of Newark Airport. If there's any good part of it, is that the 40 passengers on board Flight 93, they realized that they were going to be used as a guided missile because they had been in contact with their family members. On the plane, you have what we call airphones. So you can swipe your credit card, you can call anyone you want. So they were able to talk to their family members. And Todd Beamer was on that flight. And back then, because of what Todd Beamer said, we hear this term a lot these days. Back then, he basically said, tell my wife, my children, I love them. Then you hear him say those famous words, let's roll. Back prior to 2001, we never really heard that term, but he had that term, he coined that term. And these are our times. First tower hit until the North Tower collapse was 102 minutes. I say the towers was exploding as it was coming down. Notice the top of Tower 2 is tilting as it's coming down. And it does look like it's exploding as it's coming down. And the reason for that, well, this is the view that Chris was talking about. It's very unusual to see one building standing. World Trade Center is 110 stories off the ground. Tower came down in 10 to 12 seconds. If you have an engineering background, you realize when you have that much building coming down at that great speed, it generates a huge amount of pressure. So that's why the building appeared to be exploding as it was coming down. It just kept exploding. And of course, when it got to the bottom, it just exploded out in all different directions. The pressure was just so great. Now, you folks know what a grenade is. A grenade explodes. It has what we call a kill radius of 5 meters. If I set off a grenade over there, you folks aren't going to get hurt. You're too far away, but your eardrums are going to be killing you. When the towers came down, it had a kill radius 4 blocks, right where that arrow is. And if you see on this picture here, this is a color photo. Notice the rest of Manhattan. Here's Central Park up here. Everything's intact. Here's where the towers came down. Notice all the dust that's covering this area here? That's the 4-block kill radius. What the news media failed to show the rest of the country was that 13 to 16 buildings went up in flames or came down within seconds that morning. Everyone who has seen TV of the attack, they just assume 2,749 people, they all died inside the World Trade Center. That's not what happened. Okay, that's not what happened. Of course, we don't make this up. We have to show you pictures and videos to substantiate what we actually say. See that police car driving by? What's more important is look at the wheels. It's kicking up dust. When the towers came down, it was 100% dust. That's important to know because that dust was laden with asbestos, silica, glass, plastic, all the nasty stuff that can give you cancers. And of course, later on during the day, it became smoke because that's when the fires were just burning everywhere. Buildings were on fire and just the ground pretty much on fire. This is the Woolworth building right here. I'm standing just between the two, right over there. And I want to show you this one here. It's a video that's going to go real quick. Whoever shot this video happened to capture me. It wasn't something that we staged. Believe me, there's nothing that was staged. Whoever shot that video actually happened to capture where I'm standing. See these trees here? I'm right over here. But I'm going to show you the actual video of it right now. that dust cloud that flew over, you see, and you say, wow, it's pretty slow. What you don't see with the naked eye is the projectiles that's shooting out across. Remember that 4-block kill radius that came down? We're talking about building material, metal, steel, glass, shooting at the speed of shrapnel that you cannot see with your eyes. With that situation, I hit the ground real hard. This way, I guess the target would be just the top of my head, which is about, 6 to 8 inches. If I stood up, you have more than 5 feet of a target. The gentleman to my right, he didn't quite make it because he stood up. And people who ran, some of them didn't make it because they had a huge target standing up. Notice the building that's on fire. Buildings caught fire as soon as they got hit. A lot of people weren't able to get out of their buildings when you had that 4-block kill radius that came in. This is the Deutsche Bank over here. This building here. It's right across the street from the World Trade Center. It's not even 4 blocks away. It's right across from the World Trade Center. In 1993, when we were attacked and they set up that big truck bomb, the towers never came down. Mr. Yamazaki's design was so strong. No one really thought that the World Trade Center was ever going to come down, even when they were on fire. So on contrary to what you think happened down there, it was actually like a magnet. People were being drawn closer and closer to ground zero because it's not every day you see the World Trade Center on fire. You remember the top of Tower 2 when it came down? This is the Deutsche Bank building after the towers came down. The corner of Tower 2 over here came down, made a gouge in the Deutsche Bank. This is the Deutsche Bank, that gouge. If you count the floors, that gouge is 20 stories long. Notice the windows at the bottom. When it blew out that 4-block kill radius, it blew out the windows here. The windows up here are intact, but the windows down here are not. And if you look real closely, this is Tower 2 right over here, dangling off the bottom of the gouge. Here's the World Financial Center, American Express building, and this is the Winter Garden. They're across the street from the World Trade Centers. Winter Garden is made of glass. That 4-block kill radius that came in, glass doesn't stand much of a chance against a 4-block kill radius. You see a chunk of the American Express building is even missing here. And of course, the World Financial Center, you see the windows, these black windows here, they're blown in. It wasn't just commercial buildings that were destroyed there. We lost a lot of residential buildings also. We take for granted, you folks woke up this morning, got up out of bed, went to the bathroom, flicked on the switch, turned on the faucet, you got water, you had electricity, and you went out and made breakfast. These people had a very challenging time. No electricity. Just picture yourself waking up, having no electricity, no water, no telephone service. Back then, not everyone had cell phones, so we had what we call landlines. We actually plugged the wire into the wall to talk on the phone many years ago. For you folks who are too young, Google the picture, because I'm not going to be able to describe that one. Okay. Now, the news media also showed that we had a hole in the ground. That's impossible. You cannot have a hole in the ground when you have 13 to 16 buildings going up in flames and coming down. This is a mountain. When I was there, I was looking up at a mountain 10 to 20 stories tall, depending on where you're standing. These little dots here, these are people looking up at that mountain. And here's another perspective. It's a huge mountain. It wasn't a hole in the ground. It was a mountain. People have asked me, what's it like to be at ground zero when the attack occurred? I want you to do this exercise with me. Think about where you grew up. Think about your hometown where you grew up as a child. Think about your main street where you know every single decorations on the storefront, you know every single crack on the sidewalk and the paint scheme. Picture a beautiful day. Actually, on September 11, 2001, we didn't even have any clouds in the sky. It was just a picture-perfect day, all blue skies. Now picture an arc light strike. An arc light strike is a squadron of B-52 bombers, not one bomber, an entire squadron. As this squadron flies over your main street, they drop all their ordnances on a surgical strike down your main street. As the last bomb explodes, you then take a step into your main street. That's what it's like for me. Ground zero is my playground. And within seconds, the whole entire landscape changed forever. Here you have the outline of where the World Trade Center was. This is an aerial view, Tower 1, Tower 2. But key thing is look at what's outside in the 4-block kill radius. All those buildings were destroyed. This is a GPS. Even though it was in its infancy, we had GPS back in 2001. 1 month after the bombing, they started plotting where they found the victims. Here's North Tower, here's the South Tower, the squares. But notice, look at all the dots. Those are the victims. And of course, as the years went by, the dots became really dark. It's become very black around this area when they started plotting all these bodies. Now, why is it that the whole world got fooled? It wasn't intentional. It's the nature of being a reporter. When you go watch the news tonight, look at the people in front of the camera. Count how many seconds they're actually standing in front of the camera. They're usually standing in front of the camera, what, 15, 20 seconds. If you were a reporter reporting at Ground Zero, are you going to report on the Deutsche Bank building, which is 39 stories tall, on fire and ready to come down? Or are you going to report on this 110-story building that's on fire and coming down? Obviously, 100% of all reporters, whether domestic or international, reported only on the 110-story building. So the whole world, not intentionally, got fooled into thinking everyone who died in the World Trade Center, and that's not what happened. When I came to my senses, I realized there wasn't anything I can do. I was in a business suit, had 2 Band-Aids in my wallet, and that wasn't going to help. So I figured if I can get to the nearest operating room, I can assist their surgeons. So I went to Beekman. I identified who I was, and they didn't need me because their operating room was really going full blast. But they needed all the medical professionals to come off the street because the rest of the hospital was in dire need of medical support. They gave me the 4th floor conference room. It's just like what you think it is. It's a conference room. Up in the conference room, well, we know that New York City is a modern city. We assume modern metropolis has modern medical centers, but it was very surreal. I was in a business suit. On that hard conference room table, with no sheet or mattress, I started to sew people back together again. My tools was just 3 tools: a pair of scissors, forceps, and a needle holder. I would put it in a basin, pour isopropyl alcohol in it, slush it around, pour the liquid out, and repeat it over and over until the fluid came out clear. Then I would bring in the next patient. So it's not exactly the most ideal situation of sterility. I was in a suit, I took off my jacket, had a shirt and tie on, not even wearing a mask, and just sterile gloves, and I'm leaning over people, sewing them, putting them back together. I'm used to being in an operating room where I'm in scrubs and then a sterile gown over it. I'm used to having a staff of either a nurse, a technician. I didn't even have a janitor in there. It was just 2 people in there. It was just myself and 1 patient. By lunchtime, they weren't sending any more patients to me. I just assumed because of our proximity to Ground Zero that they were diverting ambulances to the other 4 boroughs of New York City. It didn't dawn upon me. They weren't sending patients to me up on the 4th floor. It was because there was just no more survivors coming in. So that afternoon, I was thirsty. There's no food or water in the hospital. There's nothing except burning buildings outside the hospital. So the only thing I could do was go down to Chinatown. Prior to 2001, I had moved to New Jersey, but I kept coming to Chinatown every single Sunday to go to church. And I knew if I can get to that specific church, I can get some water. See this antenna? That's not just a TV antenna, but that was the only cell phone antenna back then. As I mentioned, not everyone had cell phones back then. It wasn't it wasn't a big thing yet. When Tower 1 was struck, regardless of who your carrier was, you just lost cell service. The church in Chinatown, it's a very old church. They have those landlines. Well, like I said, Google the picture. Okay. My dad, who resides in New Jersey, he knew of all 5 boroughs of New York City, there's only one logical place I would seek refuge, and that would be at the church in Chinatown. He couldn't get a hold of me because my cell phone didn't work, but he has a landline, and he knew the church had a landline. Because he had a landline, church had a landline, at 8:20 that evening, he was able to call through, and he got a hold of me to inform me that my sister Susan was in the World Trade Center. She didn't work there. I didn't know she was up there. If I knew she was up there, I wouldn't have been effective in even helping anyone that day. Sis worked for a company known as Compact Computer. It used to be one of America's largest computer companies, but you folks probably never heard of it because they went out of business in 2013. Compact Computer was up here. See these vertical lines right here? As Chris mentioned, that's these vertical lines right there. That's Windows on the World restaurant. There were many companies up there for a very powerful meeting. Now, as guys, we know you never, never, never wear a color shirt and a tie to a professional meeting. You can wear a color shirt and tie to any meeting, but not to a professional meeting. One of the guys on Susan's team, there was a 5-man delegation that represented Compact. One of the guys on Susan's team came to work with a green shirt and a green tie. Well, that's not acceptable. He had to come down to the Marriott Hotel, this little guy right here, but this is a better view of it right here, the Marriott Hotel. He had to come down to the Marriott Hotel to buy a white shirt to match his green tie before he can go back up. When his elevator was at the bottom, that's when Tower 1 was struck. He couldn't go up, but what he was able to do was contact Houston, Texas, which is the corporate headquarters for Compact. They in turn looked up the next of kin, which was Dad, and of course then Dad got a hold of me that night. We were considered fortunate because we found out what happened to our loved one that same day. Most of the 2,749 who perished that morning, we had no idea what happened to them until about 2 weeks later. In our museum that closed, Chris and I and other docents, this is our storytelling area. We would stand here, but adjacent to us is this room over here. If you were to stand in the center of the room right here and just looked around, you notice you're surrounded by hundreds and hundreds of pictures. Keep in mind, there's only one picture, one victim. No duplicate pictures in that room. As sobering as that sight is, we lost 2,749 people in a matter of seconds that morning. When you're in there, no matter how daunting that view is, this is only a tiny, tiny, tiny representation of the amount of people we had actually lost that morning. Since September 11, 2001, we've lost, at this point, an additional 4,000 more people. As of December 2022, that 4,000 plus the roughly 3,000 who died on September 11th, we probably lost a little over 7,000 people as of today. We lose 4 people per week still. Are we going to lose more in the months and years ahead? Yes, we are. We are guaranteed. Guaranteed. The people that we lost, these additional 4,000 people, they've died from head traumas, amputations, infections, cancers. We've developed 69 different types of cancers from ground zero. And we also have a lot of suicides. I say we're going to lose more in the months and years ahead. I'm very confident because I'm one of the statistics. I've got multiple cancers growing in me. I've gone through so many surgeries, and the surgeons tell me we cannot get the cancer. My cancer is pretty far advanced. I'm okay with that because I know where I'm going after this life, so I'm good with it. But in the years after the attack, because of the unique platform that I have of being called the triple, I'm the only triple in the recorded history of New York City as it relates to the attacks of September 11, 2001. And the 3 things that you figured out that makes me a triple is I'm a survivor, I'm a family member, and I'm also a rescue worker all in one. So my plate's kind of full, but that gives me that unique platform. In the years after the attack, many colleges, many universities, they invite me to be the keynote speaker at their commencement exercises. What I notice when I speak at these commencement exercises, I decompress a little bit from that really, really full plate. When I was able to join the Tribute Museum and start giving my story, whether I speak in front of 2 people or I speak in front of 10,000 people at a graduation, I decompress the same amount. Now that our museum is gone, the museum is pretty much Chris, myself, and all the other 350 docents. We don't need a physical building anymore. We now travel around the world. We travel around the United States, and we tell people our story. And we hope, and this is our greatest hope, because there's nothing that you can ever read about. Our children go through something called American history. You open up that big textbook, and you look up September 11th, they got this one paragraph to describe all 3 areas of our country that was attacked. Do you really think one paragraph is sufficient to explain Chris's view, my view, or what we actually saw? Not even close. So that's what we're hoping on, is that for the younger generation, that you will tell your great-great-great-grandchildren what actually happened here, because we'll be gone. I know I'm going to be gone before Chris, but when we're gone, there'll be no one else to tell these stories, and we're really hoping that you would help us and just tell everyone that you know what really happened that day. So in conclusion, I'm going to have Chris come back up here, but we're going to entertain some questions. Sir?
How long did it take you to get from ground zero to your 82nd floor?
Well, taking the elevator up, it was seconds. I mean, less than a minute. But the corollary is getting down. I mean, it's going up. You go up to the 78th floor on the express, then you end up taking the local up to the 82nd floor. That particular day, people asked about getting out, and fortunately, the timeline was made for me. I knew that it was pretty much an hour and 10 minutes after the first impact that the first collapse happened. So, as Gordy said, it took 46 minutes to empty the building, except I was in the wrong stairwell, it took longer. And I ended up being down. He was talking about having that extra time built in, and I needed that time to get down to the very bottom floor. So it was an hour and 10 minutes to get down underneath the plaza for the first collapse, and it took almost a half hour to walk out, because I can tell with the second collapse happening about a half hour later, I was outside like 25 minutes to walk that whole underground mall to get out. So by knowing the major events, I was able to know where I was and knew how long it took for me to do certain things. Hopefully that answered your question.
Yep.
Right here on the right.
The museum closed.
Why?
What happened to close the museum?
Lack of interest, country has forgotten, and COVID-19. Most of the revenue that we needed for
rent.
Yeah,
For rent.
well,
They
we were
rent
actually
didn't stop.
we were about $6 million behind in rent. If you can picture, our museum was three big floors in the financial district, and we had to pay rent every single month. And there were times I would be there, there'd be like 4 people the entire day. That's not going to pay the rent.
What happened to everything that was in the museum?
The
Everything.
political answer
No, everything that happened in the
I
museum?
don't want a political answer, I want the truth.
basically went into the trash.
And then some of it, what he told me is it was property of the state, so it went up to the state archive. What does that mean, Gordy?
It means, if you can think about the movie from Indiana Jones, at the end, when they put all the stuff in the wooden crate, your politicians will say, things are safe. We sent it up to the Albany Museum, which is a tiny little museum. Yes, you can bring the artifacts up to the Albany Museum, put it in a wooden crate. It's in this warehouse, 12th section over to the left, section J, 4 flights up. It's on that shelf. So will anyone ever see this stuff again? Answer is no. Maybe 100 years from now, someone will open up one of those crates and look at this.
Wasn't there a fire truck there inside?
No, we're the original museum. You can go down to the National Memorial, you'll see a fire truck,
Okay.
but you won't see the artifacts. We are the artifacts at the original museum. That's why people from around the world, they come to our museum because they want to hear the stories.
The original museum, which opened up on the site didn't open up until the 10th anniversary. So the museum itself did not open up until 14 years later.
The museum that you're talking about opened 14 years after the attack.
And there it's highly scripted. If we volunteered there, we couldn't say what we want to say. We have to stick to the script.
We can tell you where the ladies' room is, where the men's room is, but we cannot tell you what you're here today. We cannot do what down there. We're not legally allowed to. Okay.
Why not? Why are you not legal?
We're not allowed to give our personal account of what happened. Yeah.
Why, what are they afraid of?
Well, they're afraid of what happened if you have some lunatic come in and says, I'm from Mars and I was there at the World Trade Center and things like that. You will really discredit their museum. Sir?
So I was only there one time, I think, after the 9/11, with one of my sons, and we were there, and they talked about the museum. We didn't have enough time to see it, but they talked about they had an example of a pillar, and that it was right there on the.
That's at the National Museum. That's not ours.
That's not yours. Yours is where was it yours located?
We were right next to where the firehouse was, right there on the corner.
Oh, okay.
Where
I was at the National Museum.
Yeah, that's the one we're not allowed to talk about.
Right, and then and then we had to move afterwards, where we moved about 4 blocks away, and being away from the site is not an ideal location.
Sir? Chris?
Oh, well, you tend to sometimes not think about it, but when I deployed overseas, within the month, I decided to take everything I knew and put it on paper. Because I knew 20 years from now, when I tell my story, I'm not going to remember all the details. So that was a smart move. And the way we deal with it is like Gordy said, we talk about it. It helps us decompress. By talking about it, that's our meditation, so to speak. But it turns out that, for many people say your state of mind, the good thing is, well, first, I'm English. Maybe it's that stiff upper lip in terms of character, military character. Also, I didn't see the bad stuff that went on. So, like when I came out, everything was covered. Even though what I went through was horrible, I still didn't see the bad things in terms of images in my mind. Or maybe it just hasn't hit me yet. That's another thing. However, I do get choked up, as you've seen, on certain things that I do remember. However, how do you deal with it?
I pray a lot. But if you're asking what did I feel that day, when I saw the towers on fire, I was extremely angry because someone dared attack my country and killed my people. I was very, very angry. When the towers came down, I was so scared. I was so scared. I thought if Christ was coming back today, I didn't envision him coming back in this form. I was really scared. And of course, all those emotions had to be suppressed when I had to sew people up, because I have to consider this is a patient. They need to stop bleeding. And of course, the entire day was covered in sorrow at 8:20 that evening when I found out about Susan. A lot of emotions that day, less than 24 hours, a lot of emotions.
Do you have health issues?
Say again?
Do you have health issues?
Do you have health issues?
Nah, actually, I always had a little breathing and sinus issues. And that day, being confined in that area, you get stuff rammed everywhere at you. And I did go home with a sinus headache. It turned out that Sudafed is great. It's so good you can't even buy it anymore over the counter. But they say your heart races. But it touched my lips and the sinuses clear up. But it turns out that in all seriousness, I wear contacts. Maybe that helped. I was smart enough to close my eyes when you're getting pelted with all this stuff. Jan, he had that stuff in his eyes. Because when we left there, it was time to go home. And I figured, I haven't seen a bathroom in 2.5 hours. Let me go find the bathroom. And there's a school there. They got bathrooms. The only problem is everybody, 250 people trying to go into one door. I ain't gonna wait for that. So I went for the other 7 doors. They opened up like the pearly gates because they were looking for me. We looked like the mud people. They were looking for the survivors. It was a triage center. That's when you went in, they checked to see who you are, document it so they know you made it out of there. And then they checked, that's where they saw the stuff in Jan's eyes. And Larissa had a 3/4 inch piece of glass. Remember I said the flying glass? They were laying on the floor. They were picked up off the floor and flung around. That's how strong the wind was. But when they did check her, she had a 3/4 inch piece of glass stuck in her leg. Hope that answered your question.
Did you realize the enormity of the event right away, or was it later on when you reflected back?
Not right away. It didn't seem so bad. Matter of fact, the 3 coworkers I lost, it was so bad in '93. It was relatively okay in the office. They didn't leave right away. They were just gonna wait it out. They waited too long. When the collapse happened, that's probably when they started. They waited too long. So it wasn't really bad. I just thought maybe it was a small plane, had a bad day, came into the top. So I thought I thought it could have even been a bomb in the building, with the way it shook. But it turned out that, sure enough, I really didn't realize the enormity until the collapse on top of me. That was the moment.
I want to thank you both for your service before and after. It's
Thank you.
remarkable. Were people as composed as both of you in general during this? I mean, it sounds like you were laser focused the whole time.
He was.
There panic I mean, how were other people behaving? What was
People act differently. I told you, like, Larissa's in La La Land. She's just going for the ride. If I didn't bring her along, she'd still be there. Well, not really. But it turns out that, hold on, I lost my train of thought there in terms of how
Yep.
people are acting.
Well, I cried like a baby. I had tears streaming down my face because I was so scared. I didn't know what was going on when the towers came down.
Yeah, I actually also, man, I just lost my thought again. Maybe that's what happens when you, and the stairs. What can you do? You just take a number and wait. Buildings were built to withstand the impact of a plane. I knew that. Just wait. There was two ladies that were hysterical. That's the last thing you need in a stairwell full of people. We just moved to the side and let them go. But it turned out that I was so focused. Like I said, the last task was let my wife know. And I was, again, there was nothing stopping me from that mission until I got home 5 hours later. She didn't even recognize me. But still, one time a year, the last collapse, every September 11th, I cry like a baby. And then I'm good for a year.
Did you feel, was there anyone who expected that this would implode like that? I mean,
No one expected the towers to come down. And when it did come down, it would just surprise the daylights out of the whole world.
Actually, I heard later that the head engineer made it up for the Port Authority to the first top floor, where he heard the building. I suspect he knew.
what did you run into trying to get home? Like, were subways down and cars?
Oh yeah, all the subways were down, and I knew if I was gonna go home, I would have to walk it. It's 8 miles away, I can walk 8 miles away. And it turns out that that's why I had to go to the bathroom, so I could get going. So I said goodbye to Larissa and Jan, and of course I said something like stupid, that we experienced we shared whatever an event of a lifetime, it's time for me to go. So I ended up continuing home. I get to the Manhattan Bridge, it's closed. Cop stops me, and he says, "You saw what happened? You want a bomb to go off on the bridge and you go into the river?" I go, "I just walked down 82 flights of stairs, I'll take my chances." But he didn't want to hear that, and I didn't want to fight with him. I just sat right next to him, while waiting for the bridge to open up, and like 5 minutes later, the bridge opened up. You ever seen that picture of the book Manhattan Bridge, where that wave of people going over the bridge? That was me, in terms of going over the bridge. And I was so focused going home still, that I was walking in the street, and I'm thinking, that car there, if I'm not careful, he could hit me. I can get hit by a car and get killed after coming out of the trade center. So that's how focused you are. But I knew halfway home, there's a subway stop, that if anything's working, that train might be working. And sure enough, when I got to the subway there, it was. And it was able to get me closer, where I finally had somebody drive my wife to the station. And like I said, she didn't even recognize me, she just passed me. Yes?
Was there a large water and electricity shortage after the towers collapsed?
There was actually no water. Down there was zero. We had no water, no electricity, no phones.
For how long?
About 2 weeks.
The whole city, or just like the?
No, just down in that area. That grid was shut down.
But then again, with all that dust down there, like he said, there's residential units down there, the residential buildings. Every apartment became uninhabitable because all that dust was in every apartment down there for like up to a year.
Did you guys just have to get into like the rivers and stuff to clean off, or how did you guys shower?
Say again?
How did you guys do stuff, things like shower, or did you guys just have to like get in the river?
Well, actually, particularly Battery Park City, they had like 10,000 people down there. Most of them just left and never returned.
You're not going to die if you don't shower for 2 weeks. Yeah. But that's a good thought, though. It's a good thought.
You may smell a little.
You'll smell pretty bad, but you won't die if you don't shower.
So my mom went to New York City, like, I think it was like a month or two after. She said that they were like still cleaning stuff up. How long did it take to like clean everything up?
By some estimates, it was supposed to take 5 years. By doing 24/7 and respectfully removing the remains, they amazingly cleaned down to 4 corners by Memorial Day, which is 9 months. And what's amazing is, you take the grapple hooks in there, grab some metal flinging. He talked about that piece of Tower Tunnel 2 hanging in the Deutsche Bank, trying to get that thing down. Nobody got killed during the cleanup operation in terms of physically killed down on the site, because that was a harrowing place. But the short answer to your question is 9 months.
That's 9 months right at where the footprint is. We're not talking about the 4-block kill radius. That took years. The Deutsche Bank, obviously you couldn't go back into the Deutsche Bank, but the Deutsche Bank building didn't come down. It took years before they actually started taking down the Deutsche Bank. Years.
And actually, by the 10th anniversary, they finally got rid of the last 20 floors of the Deutsche Bank, because they wanted to have that site down before they opened up the site. I suspect before they opened it up 10 years later is when the Memorial Plaza opened up to the first time to the families.
Any other questions?
So with all the, I don't want to call them movies, but with all the different TV shows now that they have about 9/11, do you feel there is some truth in some of those shows?
The only thing that we don't believe is those conspiracy theory. I can tell you the president did not put bombs in the elevator shaft or anything like that. That did not happen.
But I mean,
There is no conspiracy theory.
there's a lot of people that they've interviewed and just telling their stories. To me, it's just amazing to hear all those stories of how people survive.
I don't like watching movies because movies are sensationalized. I do like watching documentaries.
Yeah,
Those I
they
believe.
call them documentaries.
Those I believe.
We need people to raise their hands. Just don't call out. Yes, sir.
You had said when you realized you were in the crisis situation, you thought, I have to do the 5 things. What were those 5 things?
No, I was just talking about, that's how focused was,
Okay.
I was just thinking 5 steps ahead.
5 steps ahead.
Right. In other words, I just kept on leapfrogging ahead, thinking about multiple things.
And someone had a hand here.
That table that you were operating on, where was that? Was that in the church?
That was in Beekman Hospital on the 4th floor. It was a conference room
I missed
table.
that part. Okay, that was the hospital. They didn't have any other place to.
No, and they didn't send any support. I had no one to even provide sterile equipment. And they gave me, actually I found a medical student because I don't work there. And I grabbed this medical student, I go, I want you to run down to the emergency room, find something, it's called a suture kit, which consists of 3 things. And I said, just bring me that, grab all the sutures. I don't care what size the needles, I don't care what size the suture. Just grab anything you can, bring it up to me. She brought it up to me for the first patient. After that, never saw her again, she disappeared.
Where'd the patients come from? How'd they know to go to where you were?
When they were brought in and they looked at all the bleeding and they needed to be sewed up, you gotta stop the bleeding.
Right.
And they look and they say, okay, the 4th floor conference room was open, so they would send 1 patient up at a time.
They knew you were out there.
Yeah, they sent me up there. Yeah. Okay, we'll take one more question because I think Brian's giving me the time. Okay, any other questions? One more question?
Did they rebuild Deutsche Bank in the same spot?
It's gone. It's gone. Deutsche Bank is gone. Okay, and Brian, come on up.
I want to thank you so much for coming here, and the stories that you give us. And this wouldn't have been possible. I did the same thing Dave did. We thought we were going to the 9/11 National Museum, and we had a group on to go in there, and we walked in the front door. They said, no, you want to go to the Tribute Museum. And that's where we met Gordon, and he was just amazed at the story we were telling him about Jennifer Dorsey Huie at the Lincoln Southeast. So then he came out to Lincoln. So that's where these small little blessings come along, and then you find people and these opportunities for so many people to hear their stories. We're just so grateful for that. And you young guys, like he said, Chris said he wrote all his thoughts down. Do the same thing tonight or in the next few days, hearing what they said, and write it down what you heard, and then you can tell your kids and other people, because that's his whole reasoning for this, is to get other people to hear about this stuff and be able to spread the word around on what happened on that horrific day. We're thankful for the church here for letting us come in, and they are doing a big rummage sale this weekend, so if you have anything to bring in that they can use to sell, please do that. It's a wonderful thing every year like that. And before you leave, there are some cookies and some water out back as well. Grab one of those, and thank you very much for coming out tonight.